Another court blocks Biden's student loan forgiveness program. Founder of Texas Mosque killed at the Islamic Center. Released FBI documents show efforts to deploy Pegasus spyware. UN committee approves draft decision referring Israeli occupation to International Court of Justice. Germany's Muslim community worried about rise in Islamophobic attacks. Our planet is now home to 8 billion people, according to the UN. From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight. On Monday, President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program was dealt another legal setback after a second federal court ruled against it. As a result, the U.S. Department of Education has suspended federal student loan forgiveness applications. A 3-judge panel of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals granted a preliminary injunction against Biden's plan. All of the judges in the case were appointed by Republican presidents. Biden's program would have forgiven up to 20,000 student loan dollars for about 40 million Americans. The case against his plan was brought by 6 Republican-led states: Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Carolina. On Monday, a watchdog group claims former President Donald Trump's transfer of a colossal sum of cash from the leadership PAC to a Trump-aligned PAC violates federal law. The Campaign Legal Center alleges Trump directed the transfer of $20 million last month from his leadership PAC, Save America, to Make America Great Again. The money transfer was disclosed in a recent Federal Election Commission filing. The center said it amounts to a brazen attempt to circumvent the fundraising restrictions that apply to federal candidates. Trump was hit with his campaign finance complaint a day ahead of his expected 2024 presidential bid announcement. Police in Killeen, Texas are investigating the murder of the imam of a local masjid. 69-year-old Muhammad Idris Khan was killed on Saturday in the masjid he co-founded. Officers were dispatched to the mosque after receiving a 911 call about a stabbing. They found a man with a stab wound from a knife and identified and detained a male suspect, police said. Usman Denkwa, mosque president, said that the suspect was Khan's tenant and that he was stabbed the imam because he had evicted him. Denkwa said Khan helped build the Islamic community of Killeen and is heartbroken by his loss. In a tweet on Sunday, Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO of Anti-Defamation League, accused comedian Dave Chappelle and Saturday Night Live of popularizing antisemitism. Chappelle commented on recent controversies from Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, and Kyrie Irving. He said there was a lot of Jews in Hollywood. One can think about it, but cannot talk about it without consequences. He also joked about Senate candidate Herschel Walker, calling him observably stupid, a comment which has since gone viral. Chappelle is Muslim. 2 of his 3 children are named after prophets revered by Jews and Muslims alike, Suleiman and Ibrahim. Former Vice President Mike Pence over the weekend called ex-President Donald Trump's rhetoric reckless. Pence said Trump's speech ahead of the January 6, 2021 attack endangered him and his family. Trump repeatedly refused to call off the mob of supporters terrorizing the Capitol. At one point, Trump tweeted that Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done, as he tried to block the certification of Trump's loss. Pence told ABC News anchor David Muir that he was angered by the tweet. The former vice president said his daughter was standing nearby and he told her, "It doesn't take courage to break the law. It takes courage to uphold the law." FBI documents released by the New York Times on Saturday highlight an effort by the agency to secure and deploy Pegasus spyware in 2020 to 2021. Pegasus spyware, developed by Israeli-based NSO Group, is a zero-click hacking tool. It can infiltrate a target's mobile phone and extract messages, photos, contacts, and video recordings. Numerous governments have purchased and deployed Pegasus in recent years, according to the documents. The spyware has been used by police and intelligence services to hack the phones of drug kingpins and terrorists. It gained notoriety after governments like those of Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Hungary, and India were found to have used it. Their targets were political dissidents, journalists, and human rights advocates. Amnesty International has expressed concerns that NSO Group software has been used for unlawful surveillance and human rights abuses. UN committee approves draft decision referring Israeli occupation to ICJ. Details after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
On Friday, the UN Fourth Committee approved 6 draft resolutions and an additional draft decision requesting an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. The opinion being sought is on the legal consequences of denying the Palestinian people the right to self-determination. The resolutions pertain to Israel's actions since 1967 and subsequent occupation of Palestinian territories. The committee concluded the deliberation for the 78th General Assembly. The General Assembly Committee voted with 52 abstentions. The resolution now goes to the 193-member Assembly for a final vote before the year's end. On Sunday, Iran's judiciary issued preliminary sentences to some protesters recently arrested, with one of them receiving the death sentence. A person who allegedly set fire to a government building was sentenced to death on charges of disturbing public order and peace, assembly, and collusions to commit crimes against national security, war, and corruption in the land. 5 other defendants were sentenced between 5 and 10 years. These were on charges of assembly and collusion to commit crimes against national security and disruption of public order and peace. The government has not released the official death toll from recent protests. Independent watchdog groups have put the figure at more than 250, including civilians and policemen. Javed Rahman, Special UN Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran, last week said as many as 14,000 people had been arrested since September. German authorities reported at least 662 Islamophobic crimes in 2021. More than 46 mosques were attacked and at least 17 people were injured in a spat of anti-Muslim violence. Suleiman Demir, project director of INSAN, said attacks on Muslims and mosques have risen following the COVID-19 pandemic. He added the situation is serious as Germany is facing economic difficulties. Demir told Anadolu agency women who wear headscarves particularly are being targeted. He also warned far-right groups are trying to exploit the ongoing economic and energy crisis to stir fear and hatred against minorities. Germany has the second largest Muslim population in Western Europe after France. Amongst the country's nearly 5.5 million Muslims, 3 million are of Turkish origin. Israeli army forces on Monday demolished a Palestinian Bedouin village in the southern Negev region, according to a local official. Israeli forces raided the village of Al-Araqib and razed all homes inside it for the 209th time. Aziz Al-Tori, a member of the local committee for the defense of Al-Araqib, told Anadolu agency. He said villagers are resolved to rebuild their destroyed dwellings and structures again. Inhabited by 22 Palestinian families, homes in Al-Araqib are built of wood, plastic, and corrugated iron. Last month, Israeli forces demolished the village, but villagers managed to rebuild it again. The village was first destroyed in 2010, but was rebuilt after every demolition ever since. Israeli authorities claim that the site where it is located falls under state land. Tensions are running high between Pakistan and Afghan border forces. That is after Islamabad shut its southwestern border with Afghanistan for cross-border movement for an indefinite period, officials and local media reported on Monday. The Chaman border, also known as Friendship Gate, connects Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province to Afghanistan's southern Kandahar province. It was closed after an armed Afghan reportedly crossed into Pakistan's border and opened fire on security troops, killing a soldier and injuring another 2 on Sunday. The attack was followed by hours-long firing between Pakistan and Afghan border troops, prompting the closure of the key trade border between the 2 neighbors. The border will remain closed until the handing over of the suspected attacker. A search operation is underway to nab the attacker, who is still at large. Footage aired on Pakistani broadcaster Geo News showed hundreds of trucks loaded with trade goods and other vehicles lined on both sides of the border. They're awaiting the reopening of the crossing. For more than 3 hours, India was at the receiving end of a slew of recommendations and concerns about its human rights violations. This was part of the Universal Periodic Review process, a peer-based evaluation mechanism under the UN Human Rights Council. It is the 4th time India has gone through this evaluation process, the last one being in 2017. Criticisms range from the tightening of restrictions on civil society to the broad use of anti-terrorism legislation. Tushar Mehta, India's Solicitor General, led its inter-ministerial delegation that opened the meeting. He made a series of short presentations about government policies protecting the rights of various marginalized communities. Around 130 countries participated in the meeting. Their recommendations will be compiled in a report including India's specific response to each proposal. The final report will be adopted next week. The world's population is projected to reach 8 billion today, a milestone in human development according to the UN. The agency said this unprecedented growth is due to the gradual increase in human lifespan due to improvements in public health, nutrition, personal hygiene, and medicine. It also is the result of high and persistent levels of fertility in some countries. It took the global population 12 years to grow from 7 to 8 billion. It will take roughly 15 years until 2037 for the global population to reach 9 billion. The overall growth rate of the global population is slowing. Countries with the highest fertility levels tend to be those with the lowest income per capita. Population growth has over time become increasingly concentrated amongst the world's poorest countries, mostly in the sub-Saharan Africa. Take 1. Coming up next, after the break, is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. 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 And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam is and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is really smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at our in-depth analysis segment.
President Biden says in his announcement about the student debt relief that 20 million borrowers will have no debt left, and benefits go in total to 43 million borrowers. Is that all true? To discuss all of this with us is Professor Sam Workman. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Professor Workman is Director of Institute for Policy Research and Public Affairs at West Virginia University. So what is the President Biden's total announcement in this regard?
Well, I think the plan has sort of three ideas. The first is that you fix the public student loan program. The second is you extend the moratorium on payments until the end of the year, December 31st. And then finally, capping repayment at 5% of discretionary spending, which cuts it in half. It used to be 10%. And in addition to that, of course, the sort of the bell ringer of it all, which is 10,000 cancellation of debt for those making less than 125,000, and up to 20 grand for those who are on Pell Grants.
So, hey, is it something extraordinary or so-so or confusing?
I wouldn't say it's extraordinary. The thing is, these folks are still going to have debt. The real sort of impetus for this is the generation of Americans who we would call millennials, who could be anywhere from sort of 25 up to 42, 43 years old, who have really not been able to partake in the normal things that we would call sort of the American dream. So home ownership, safe transportation, the ability to pay for an education for their children. And so I think the concern there is that these folks are really struggling to partake in that. And then secondly, that has huge economic impacts down the road for folks who, may never own homes and whatnot. So I think that's the real impetus for this. But this doesn't fix, you have to understand, this does not fix the sort of soaring cost of college and the changing landscape of higher education. There's still going to be student loans going on, and in a lot of instances, they're quite effective.
So AOC says that not enough. Is she right? She's right.
I mean, I think that's hard to. I think that's hard to say. This will cancel debt for several million Americans, but still, the worth of a college degree in the United States is still a good 20% higher earnings for folks who graduate beyond those who don't go to college. So the student loan program is still very effective. What's really going on is a longer term trend of sort of transition in higher education to different models of operating public universities as institutions amid sort of declining sort of public, state support for higher education. And so a part of these changes that are driving these rising costs are really public universities adapting to that and getting on a footing where they can compete with nonprofit and private sector folks.
What about giving loan but without interest?
That's not how we do things here in America. And I think that in part, this is an effort a little bit to address that, right? Because the federal government is saying that they're going to take up the interest for folks who are not making enough money to pay that, so that they're not stuck in sort of a situation where they're forever paying interest-only payments on things. But I think you have to have some element of interest to get private sector buy-in. Remember, it's the private sector that administer these loans ultimately. And so they're just guaranteed by the federal government. So there has to be some buy-in there for the private sector to be able to do this stuff. So,
who qualifies for this debt forgiveness?
At the 10 grand level, anyone who makes 125K or less would qualify as long as they meet certain conditions. And then if you receive Pell Grants, which is a form of federal grant given to very low income students in the United States, it's possible to get up to $20K of relief.
The banks normally are not going to give without interest. But our not-for-profit sector is huge. And they do a whole lot of charitable things. Why a student loan cannot be taken by the not-for-profit sector instead of business?
Well, the thing to understand about the nonprofit sector is they compete on a footing which is a little more uncertain than established financial institutions, right? And so nonprofit sectors depend very often on, either government grants, which sometimes come and sometimes don't come, or they depend on philanthropy, and those aren't stable sources of funding for administering something as large as the student loan program. And so I think, and then on top of that, I think most, for very large programs like this, I think most research would tell you that government or private sector is a little more, it's not really about service delivery, it's more about stability and reliability of the service.
So how were they doing it when not in far, in recent past, interest rate had been zero?
Right. Well, the thing is, interest rates, that's a separate conversation and probably one to have with an economist, but interest rates are certainly part of the story, right? So early on in the student loan program, where we had Pell Grants were more robust in terms of actual expenses for things. We had much lower rates. And then, of course, over time, rates have drifted upwards towards 6%, I think is the average. And so there are economic reasons for that and sort of the economy of interest rates. And I'll leave that for someone else to talk about, but they've certainly gone up. And part of this too is it's not just an interest rate story, but I was like I was saying, is when you have sort of declining public support for public universities, and these are all policy decisions that originate in publics out there who are voting for things, right? Universities have to adjust and adapt, and some of those changes are more expensive. The other backdrop for this is changing technology, right? It used to be the case we didn't need classrooms that were wired for Wi-Fi and where everyone would have access to a laptop or a computer or something. So those technological expenses are very real. In the early days of higher education, you had one person who was sort of good with computers and they could help a bunch of people. And now we have whole departments for that, for instance. And so I think interest rates is part of the story, certainly, but also you just have the changing landscape for higher education that is both external and happens out there in the sort of the political world, but also internally, organizationally, where these institutions are adjusting to those transitions.
So what is next after President Biden's current announcement? Do you think steps like that will continue to be considered by Republicans and Democrats in future, or what other things need to be done from your perspective to decrease the burden of education?
Well, I think in general, I don't know that we're going to see a period where this broader sort of social and organizational transition is going to abate. This is a process of both the universities and students adapting to an environment where universities compete with nonprofit and private sector providers of instruction. And so, and need to find ways to fund themselves through grants and contracts and things like that. As long as that is the case, we're going to see, we're going to see college expense stay roughly the same. I think one point people are missing about this policy is this is not an act of Congress. It's not legislation. This is an executive order, a president doing something unilaterally. those things are very sort of ephemeral in American politics because each president can issue a different executive order the first day they are in office. So I don't expect to see similar policies or policies like this to continue, at least with specificity to students, right? We might see it for other groups or whatnot, but I think this is a one-shot deal.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Workman, for your time.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.